We're looking at something very important in this podcast. Something that we have that's very precious in America is the liberties and freedoms that sometimes we take for granted. So it's good at times to look back into the past and see from where we've prospered. And so this podcast is about the roots of our American democracy. There's 8 sections on this review because each one of these sections is on the test. So the first one is the Crack the Code questions. When you did that quiz game called Crack the Code, you answered these questions, and I told you to pay attention to them. So here they are on the screen. Make sure that you know those. You're going to see some of those on the test. And then the second section is on the religious and classical roots that are part of our American democracy. So basically they come from 2 streams, but it's a single stream in some ways. We often call Judaism and Christianity together Judeo-Christian because they're so similar in their basic beliefs. They believe in the 10 Commandments, those kind of things. So from the Judeo-Christian tradition, we got, first of all, from Judaism, the idea of creating a just society based on respect for law. The Jews were really honored the Torah, the law, and if you read the minor prophets in the Hebrew Bible, they're constantly talking about creating a just society, treat the poor fairly, treat all people equally, don't abuse those that don't have the power that you have. So create a just society. And then from the Christian side of the Judeo-Christian stream, there's a lot of ideas that have entered, but the main one, equality in the eyes of God. And so our 5th Amendment, our 14th Amendment, the Civil Rights Movement, they all come out of this idea that we're all equal in God's sight. These documents that are famous American documents, and we could add here the Declaration of Independence, show these ideas in practice. If you read Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights, Thomas Jefferson's Virginia Bill for establishing religious freedom, which he was so proud of, it's one of the 3 things he had put on his gravestone, that he was the author of the Virginia Bill for establishing religious freedom. And then what I consider the greatest writing just about in American history, Madison was a great legislator, a great thinker, philosopher. He wrote the Memorial and Remonstrance against religious assessments. And so these documents embody this Judeo-Christian heritage that we have. The hinge of the argument in each of these documents is that each individual conscience stands in the presence of its creator. That's what's in these American documents. That's right. Each individual owes a primordial duty to his or her creator. So the thinker Michael Novak writes, this view is held by only 2 religions. It's not found in Buddhism and Hinduism. It's not found in animism or pantheism. It's not found in the religions of the ancient Greeks and Romans. It's not found in the religions of the Incas, the Mayas. It's not even found in Islam, Novak says. He says only Judaism and Christianity among all the world religions developed these concepts, which are in these American documents, that there is a creator and that each individual owes a personal accounting to him, and that's prior to the claims of any claims of the state. That's why Madison said we need to have separation of church and state, because ultimately the state can't get at that part of your conscience which is uniquely yours. The state can't govern that, so the state needs to give you freedom of your religious conscience. Natural law is another part of this root. Natural law is the idea that there is a set of laws that are moral principles that apply in all places, in all cultures, in all contexts. And Thomas Aquinas, the Christian philosopher, said that this natural law could be found through reason and through an inborn sense of right and wrong. So these laws exist in nature. That's why they're called natural law, but they're not really written down. Another root, the classical roots of our American democracy, come from the Greeks and Romans, the ones who originated democracy. The Athenians in Greece all the men would go and to the forum, and they would all get to vote. That's direct democracy, where you don't elect representatives, you vote yourself. An example of that is New England town meetings that we have still, where if you remember that town, you go and everybody votes. And from Rome, we get the idea of representative government. The Romans had a senate where all the people were represented, including the lower classes, the plebes, by the tribunes. And we call our representative government, part of it anyway, the Senate. So we got that from Rome. And civic virtue is an idea. Roman boys and girls growing up were taught to believe in virtue and nobility and to serve their country. And we have that as part of the American heritage. Kennedy said, famous inaugural address, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So civic virtue, the idea, the willingness to serve one's country. Greece, Rome, or home? Is that in Greece, Rome, or home? Well, that's the capital. That's here at home. So is that. How about that? Greece, Rome, or home? That's the Jefferson Memorial. That's here in the U.S. What about that? Greece, Rome, or home? It's in Washington, D.C. How about this one? Greece, Rome, or home? Well, you can see it's got Latin written on it. This one was taken in Rome. Okay, the third section of the test, the English Great Documents. So you need to know these three documents. The people and the colonists looked to England as part of their heritage, and these documents gave them meaning. The Magna Carta, 1215, a major advance in the history of the world. The nobles of King John confront him on the plains of Runnymede and say, sign this document, we're going to set limits on your power. And so now kings were under the rule of law. It's not the rule of men. And so setting a limit on the king's power was huge, a huge part of the Magna Carta in 1215. But over the centuries, that had been lost to a certain extent, and so the English reaffirmed it. The Petition of Right in 1628, the English said Parliament's going to limit the power of the king, and so the principle of limited government comes in. In 1628, when the Petition of Right was written, the rest of Europe, the kings were seeking absolute power, and so only in England was there this attempt to limit the king's power through the Parliament. And then finally in 1689, the English Bill of Rights. William and Mary were called to take the throne of England from Orange in Normandy, where they were. And they were told that they had to agree to the English Bill of Rights. And so they agreed. That was called the Glorious Revolution, because no one was killed for a new king and queen to take over in England. And in the English Bill of Rights that William and Mary had to sign are things that we have in our Bill of Rights. We got them straight from the English Bill of Rights. The right to petition, that's in our First Amendment. The right to bear arms, that's in our Second Amendment. Freedom from cruel and unusual punishment, that's our Eighth Amendment. The right to trial by jury, that's the Sixth Amendment. So the English Bill of Rights established the power of Parliament over the king. Fourth section, English Enlightenment thinkers. Hobbes and Locke, they believed in social contract theory. Hobbes wrote Leviathan, and he said that life in the state of nature was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Therefore, Hobbes said, to escape from this misery, people entered into a social contract. I'll obey you, government, if you protect me. That's the contract. The people agreed to obey, the government agrees to protect them, the social contract. Locke agreed in the social contract. He said in the state of nature, all people were equal, and they had natural rights, the rights to life, liberty, property. But Locke added a provision to the social contract. He said you could break it. You could break that contract if the government abused you. And Thomas Jefferson used that idea in the Declaration of Independence. Even though we like England and they've given us a lot of stuff, they started taking rights away. They didn't give us a right to vote on taxation. And so the social contract is provisional. Thomas Jefferson borrowed the idea from John Locke. Also the fourth section, the French Enlightenment thinkers, so Montesquieu and Rousseau. Montesquieu wrote The Spirit of Laws, and the main idea there is that the powers of government should be separated, have separate executive, legislative, and judicial powers. Montesquieu, separation of powers. And Rousseau, the big idea from him, he wrote The Social Contract, was popular sovereignty. What the people want should go. He called that the general will. American colonial leaders agreed with Rousseau that the government should be based on the will of the people. And Thomas Paine wrote what was the biggest selling book in the colonies, Common Sense, based it on Rousseau's idea of the general will.